don't know who I am, but I know all about you. I've come to talk to you tonight about the things I've seen you do. I've come to set the record straight. I've come to shine the light on you. Let me introduce myself. I am the cold hard truth.
Okay, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another segment of the Cold Hard Truth. I am your host, none other than Sandy Hill. Still standing, folks. I know some of you thought I might have been taken under by a little trial that we had this week. Just a quick update, that trial continues. We're back in court on June the 17th, so we're on quite a break because the DPP's office had other business that they needed to attend to, hopefully fighting some real crime. So of course, because I'm in the middle of my testimony, I'm not in a position to discuss that testimony. But as soon as that is over, we will have lots of discussions to be had. However, the discussion at this particular time, at this moment, is regarding persons around the world who are dealing with racism, who are fighting with racism, against racism, I should say, and racist individuals. And we are going to dedicate this entire week to looking at this. This should be labeled its own pandemic because this has been going on for far too long, folks. And people all over the world have had enough. Our American brothers and sisters have had enough. They are protesting. Unfortunately, in some areas, the protests have really just, gone to a different level. But people are saying, listen, enough is enough, and they simply cannot take any more. So we were supposed to be joined by Jasmine this evening. Jasmine is a young lady who is a biracial Caymanian, but unfortunately she's not feeling well. So instead, we will be joined by Charles Whitaker. So get ready, get your tea ready, your hot tea, your whatever drink of your leisure, whether it's hot tea or something a little bit harder than that. I would dare say that get it ready tonight because Charles, he always brings it particularly hard and always true and always his opinion, that's for sure. So, at the end of the day, I think people have had enough. This is Bob Marley saying until the philosophy which holds our race, one race superior and another race inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war. And that really, I think, sums up how a lot of persons are feeling about the situation. Some people are saying, what happened to the peaceful protests? And there have been people who've been protesting peacefully for a very long time. There was a comparison earlier today to, Dr. Martin Luther King. Obviously, his protests were very peaceful. But how far has that really gotten the people of the U.S.? That's the real question. Charles. Good evening, my friend, and thank you so much for joining the program. I can see a black screen for Charles. Charles, why am I not seeing you? I can see in my preview window, but I'm not seeing you otherwise. So let me just give Charles a second there to just refresh his stream. Maybe it got stuck. You guys know how the internet here is in the Cayman Islands. First of all, I want to thank all of our guests who joined us this morning on the program. They were from Los Angeles and New York. We're going to have more persons joining us tomorrow. In fact, we're going to hopefully have a young lady from Minneapolis. So she is in the heat of of what's happening. And she's got footage from the protesting there. And she's going to inform us of exactly what is going on. So, Charles, let's try that again. Good evening and welcome to the program tonight. Okay, I can see you, but I can't quite hear you. Um, can't hear you. Sometimes the headset, I don't know if you have access to a headset, but sometimes the headset works best on your end. So let me just give you a second to get that sorted out, and then we'll come back to you here in a second. So again, let's just read some of your comments. Thank you guys as always for tuning into the program. I figure, listen, we're going to dedicate this week to race relations, and we're going to start looking at this in the context of the Cayman Islands, hopefully by by Thursday. But I mean, there's always an undertone of race in the Cayman Islands. Sorry, and it's about time that we really had a thorough discussion. So this entire week, all of the morning shows, all of the evening shows will be dedicated to this single sorry, discussion. I am looking for a um, a video that someone shared with me sometime last month, a couple weeks ago, that I can't seem to now put my finger on, but hopefully I'll be able to find it shortly. That really brings home, I think, a lot of what is happening in the US in particular. But, you know, the US isn't a bubble. The US doesn't operate on its own. Unfortunately, the world has gotten used to classism, racism, and all sorts of ongoing prejudices that we just seem to accept as second nature, and we define it as being almost human nature for people to have these feelings. And it's race and sort of hate of another culture, another person, is really something that is a learned behavior. And surely if people can learn it, sorry, they can unlearn it as well. So we're going to dedicate the entire week to this topic. I know some of you might think, oh gosh, well, that's a long discussion. But you know what? It's about time that we had it, is all I can say. So let's see if Charles is ready for us. Charles, how's it looking? Yeah, can you hear us? Yeah, we can see you, but we can't hear you for some reason. Oh, hold on a second. I think that's my fault. Hold on. I just see an unmute mic button here. So give me 1 second. Can't unmute your guest. The mic isn't connected. So this is saying that you don't have a mic connected. So just double check your laptop and your device and make sure that your mic. There we go. I think you're all right. Try it now, Charles. Not quite. Okay, while Charles is still trying to get his mic connected, let's read a few of your comments. We've got Irvlin who is here. Thank you so much, Irvlin. Cecile, good evening to you. Olivia says, good night. Love the topic as I'm mixed race and I've faced a lot of racism from white folks here. Olivia, tell us exactly where you are when you say here. Where is it that you live? Rocio says, hello, Miss Sandy. Carla, thank you so much, Carla, for tuning in. Carla is like a top fan. Good evening to you. We've got Quincy Brown from Cayman Brack. Quincy says, good evening. Great topic. Irvlin says, BLM, Black Lives Matter. Charles Chambers says, what we have here is nationality racism and not skin color racism. Well, Charles, we're going to talk about that because I don't agree. I think we want to call it other things to try to make ourselves feel better when in fact we have got straight up color racism. And I say that because if we didn't, it wouldn't matter what shade of brown you are. And there are a lot of Caymanians who are concerned about the shade of color that you are. And so we're going to talk about some of those things here with Charles once he jumps back into the conversation. Tamara, sorry, thank you so much again for tuning in. Larry says, hi again from New York. Thank you, Larry. Racism makes me sad. Let's grow up. And Larry, I don't even know if racism is about growing up as it is about growing out, if that makes any sense. So there's a process of, if you've been exposed to certain things in your life, to grow out of those things and to move to, the perspective where you can accept all people as equal on face value. based on their actions solely, and don't prejudge people just because of the color of their skin. So, um, sorry, gosh. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with what has kicked this off, there have been a number of instances in the past, but uh, last week, a African American gentleman, he's only 46 years old, lost his life at the hands of several police officers, and thus far, only one police officer has been arrested and charged with third-degree murder, which basically meant that he didn't even intend to do it. That's a watered down degree of murder in the US. So it's going to be interesting. But as a result of that, there have been numerous protests. It's almost like a tipping point. You know, this is it. People are just fed up and they have had enough. And so people are protesting all over the US. I mean, the protests, it's astonishing. The United States President, Donald Trump, is talking about bringing the military guard in, um, which a lot of cities have indicated to him that they do not have any desire for him to intervene on that level. And, there are people who are looting and burning and doing other things. But as we can see, I think the vast majority of the protesters have actually been very peaceful. And it's those few people who are taking away from the true message here. And I think that it's really, really unfortunate. So Mitzi just shared something. Mitzi, I'm going to see if I can, access that link, where she shared a link about explain white privilege. And I decided to be honest. Olivia says, I'm a Heights in West Bay, and I work customer service, and I've had customer comments on my race. Well, Olivia, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Sandy.
There we go. Now I can hear you loud and clear. Debbie, thank you so much for tuning in. Debbie says, I think racism is a worldwide issue, and Cayman should join in the march to show solidarity as the rest of the world is doing. Many Caymanians, including me, grew up in the US and identify with this issue. Cayman does not live in a bubble. And that's what we want to talk about here this evening, Charles. Cayman does not live in a bubble, but it seems at times that we kind of think that we do. So what are your thoughts on this topic? And we know you've got a lot to say about race relations, because this is a new conversation that you and I have had. Sorry, we've been talking about this for quite some time, but for people who might be tuning in and don't really know who you are, just a quick introduction, Charles. Identify yourself. Who are you?
Charles Whitaker. Charles Edwards Whitaker.
Charles is like, that's all you need to know. My name, and that's it. That's it, Bobo. All right. So, Charles, listen, race relations is not an easy discussion to be had. I did receive a message earlier that you were having some very heated discussions on social media, and I haven't yet seen those. So I haven't been privy to that information, but I think you ruffled some feathers. What do you make of, when you hear yet another Black man's life has been taken? I don't know if you saw the video from the show this morning that we shared, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. This man was had someone's knee on his neck that ultimately cost him his life. And when the knee was finally removed, the man was frothing at the mouth, which pretty much means he was a goner, I think, from that point in time. And even after the officer removed his knee off of his neck, he and the other officers were not very forthcoming with the ambulance service, the fire service, that came after the ambulance, so that they could know how to locate this man and provide additional medical assistance to him. And I think that speaks volumes, man. I'm just like, it really brought me to tears. And what are you making of this? I know you live between Cayman and the US, so what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Sandy, they made a non-emergency call.
Yes,
they called. The call that they made was they made a call was a non-emergency call.
Yeah.
And also, you notice that the people who got out of the ambulance, those were not regular paramedics, those are police officers. They didn't play much. Those are police officers. No one tried to resuscitate him. No one tried to offer any help. But let me say this. I have watched that video a number of times. I've cried each time I watch it. I'm 46 years old. I've been in the U.S. since '94, traveling back and forth and living there. I have 2 kids. Right now, right this very minute, they're in the United States. I got a 13-year-old. I got a 19-year-old over there right now. They're the youngest ones. They're out and about. You know, Michael's out and about every day. A lot of people don't understand this. And people in Cayman, you know, oftentimes, sadly, I hear people here always say things like, them black people are always complaining. Them black people are always making noise or protesting. But it's a big difference when you live someplace and you drive through. Luckily for me, I live in the suburbs of Winter Haven. I got a nice home over there. But for those who don't live in such a nice area,
looks like Charles' internet dropped out there. So Charles is just giving us a little bit of background information on, you know, where he lives in the U.S. Charles, are you back with us?
Yeah, sorry about that. Internet dropped. Yeah, the internet drops. Those are usually hunting grounds for police officers. You know, those are hunting grounds. You know, when they want to write tickets, they go to those neighborhoods. But anyway, what we saw happen to George Floyd.
But is anybody safe? I mean, you say that you live in a nice area of Florida, but is anybody safe?
No,
I mean, we see.
No.
Yeah.
When you're black, you're not safe. You know, you're black. You're not safe. You're just a little bit. You know, you're a little bit better off if you don't live around certain neighborhoods. But eventually, you have to venture out on the street. You know, I find myself every day, because Mike drives now, so every day I find myself reminding him, Michael, don't speed. Be careful. I don't want you having any confrontations with the police. That's my number one pet talk every day with him. You know, I don't want you to have any confrontation with the police. When we go into the supermarket, if we go to Walmart or something, you know, Azalea walk around and touch things, and I said, Azalea, stop touching things. Don't touch anything. You know, and I know that a lot of times she might think, oh, Dad, there you go again. But I said to her, look, baby, we are always being watched. You know, I said to her, I said, did you see that lady, that person came over here and they're walking around acting as if they're looking for something? No, they're watching us. You know, I've seen that in stores. They walk in the store and you get followed, you get watched. It's a very serious issue, you know. When you have, I saw a video today where a black kid was telling what his mother teach him about what not to do and what to do. And that's a sad reality. And unless you're a black parent, you can't relate to that. When you have a 10-year-old kids, listen, be careful. Don't play your music too loud. You know, be careful. Don't stare. Don't, you know, careful what you do, you know. So it's a very unfortunate situation, but it's good to see all of our young white brothers and sisters out there protesting against injustice that has taken place. So it's always good to see that the next generation is striving to be better than the one before.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's break it down. We've got Jake saying that they all need to be charged, because if I rob a store and 3 of my friends outside in the getaway car, they're going to jail right away. So why not the other 3 officers? And in fact, Jake, the other 3 officers, it's not like they were just standing up there allowing this to happen. they were part of the problem. So they had their knees on this man as well. They
Yes,
were holding him down. So they
exactly. Two,
and
two of them, two of them were helping. Two of them were helping to hold him down, so the one with his foot in his neck could get a good grip,
right.
and the other one was standing around with his hands in his pocket, just simply thinking, "I dare you come over here and do something, so I can shoot you down too."
Yes.
And that because they was enjoying what they did, and
Absolutely.
this wasn't their first time. They got away with this before.
Yeah.
They got away with this kind of behavior before, and they knew, even with those cameras right there, they were going to get away again.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, the guy now that they have arrested, he is, this isn't the first time that he has had some issues as a police officer for using excessive force. So, I mean, I thought that that was really interesting. Andre says, when the system oppresses who we tell it on, the people want justice, and I don't see any real assistance to make the oppression stop. Babylon or crucify the poor. My heart can't take it no more. One love from Jamaica. And Larry says it's impossible to be a racist from birth until maybe 7 years old. Kids are innocent. Racism is learned. Challenge what you have learned. I think it goes way before 7, Larry, because I've seen studies done with much younger children where they give them a doll and they show them the white doll and the black doll, and those kids are younger than 7 at the time. And they express a clear preference for the white doll, including African American children, black children, express a preference for the white doll. And in their heads, even at that very young age, they were of the opinion that the black dolls were evil and bad and needed to be punished. And so even when they were role playing with the little black dolls, they would be more aggressive with the black dolls and they would beat the black dolls. And it's just like, this indoctrination of this institution we call racism has long existed. This is, just what's the word I'm looking for? Not systematic.
Absolutely, Sandy.
You know what I'm saying? It's just entrenched in the very fiber of American culture. America was built on the back, shoulders, everything of slavery. And so that is the American.
It's not just America though. Not just America though. Western civilization was built on the backs of slavery.
Yeah.
Okay. The racism is not only coming out of America, Canada, Australia, the English, the French, the South Africans.
Yes.
But those again, those are English also. The French are English. The Australians originally English. The American slavery began in America when it was British America.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's why I refer, Sandy, to the British as the innovators and pioneers of evil and creative suffering.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Their history precedes them.
Yep.
I know that here we have a greater level of fear with them, but when you look at their history, I hear some people refer to Winston Churchill as the great Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill starved 4.5 million Indians to death. And when he was being told of what his actions were doing by removing all the food from the nation, his only question was, why isn't Gandhi dead yet? But he was a great man because he killed 4 million dark-skinned people.
Right.
So that made him great.
Amazing. Wow. Well, Keith says victim mentality. I'm not quite sure what that's in reference to. Anne shares a very interesting study. I think this is the same one that I was making reference to, where it says education study, Black girls viewed as less innocent than white girls. And this is why, Anne, I'm so glad that you shared that. I'm going to try to see if I can pull up that article. And I think all of the people, need to read these types of articles, because that is why I am particularly offended in our communities when, as persons of color, we accept certain behavior from our own people. Whether it's somebody like an R. Kelly or some persons locally who we won't mention their names at the moment because we might get hauled into court again, their behavior towards young girls and the sexualization of young girls anywhere from very young up to their teenage years, is utterly disgusting. And this article speaks to that, and it's one of the ways, yet again, that racism rears its ugly head. That Black girls are seen, they're sexualized earlier. They are seen as disposable. That you can abuse them,
Well,
you can do all sorts of things to them, and there
well,
will be no consequences.
black has always been demonized. You know, the most devalued people in the world have been black people. You
Mm,
know, that's just the way it has always been. The system, the Western world was built upon that. We were when they built this, wrote the Constitution of America, they didn't write it to include black people have rights. I mean, for blacks to have rights. If you remember, after they claimed to have emancipated the slaves, freed the slaves, they went back and wrote a law that said if you were homeless and living in the street, they could put you back in jail. Then they had another law behind that said if you were back in jail, they could put you back in the plantation. Well, guess who didn't have a house to live in after 400 years of slavery or after 250 years of slavery? The same black people. So, they didn't really end slavery when they say they did. What they have done today is, as
mhm,
long as the slave mentality, as long as the ideologies of slavery still exist, we haven't ended slavery. They have extended the plantation, is what they have done. They have changed the methods in most cases. They're not using guard hoses and guard dogs and fire hoses no more,
mhm,
and police batons to shoot us down in masses anymore. Now they sit in the courthouse. Now
mhm.
they sit in the office at the bank, and they use white privilege to stop you from getting a loan. These are the things they do now. They're building it systemically. We have a problem here with that. The problem is that our people live in darkness. Our people are not need to enlighten themselves. We are too busy saying things like, that was them black people. That was them black people in Jamaica. That was them black people in Barbados. That was them black people in America. Failing to realize that we may have ended up at a different port, but we came in the same ship.
Right.
You know,
So,
and this is what I said. This is part of what I said this morning on social media. We need to begin to enlighten and educate. We need to begin to educate ourselves, and it cannot be the books they give us here in any public school here or in a private school here to read, because those books were meant to give you an inferior education about yourself. So in order for us to become aware of who we are, we have to begin self-education, begin to read and look at our history, because our history didn't begin with slavery. Slavery was an attempt to end our history, but it didn't begin there.
right. So Anne says she shared another link that says the other article is that Black children are more likely to be disciplined than white kids for the same incident. This is what happens when they grow up. Black people are more likely to be put in jail than whites for the exact same offense. And I think it's so interesting that, Anne is sharing these studies and these articles because these are well founded. I mean, they've probably done a few studies by now in terms of this, but it certainly helps explain a lot of the end result that we see in terms of even the incarceration numbers, not just in the U.S. but across the entire world, as you rightfully said, Charles. Even right here in the Cayman Islands. I mean, we look at
I was going to say, let's stick right here at home.
yeah.
Let's stick right here at home.
So
We
we look
see it
at
here at home.
numbers.
When we look around this, but I want to send out a message to Caymanian parents this evening. We have to begin to direct our kids, to have conversation with our kids, to build a social consciousness, to
Mhm.
become more socially conscious, and encourage our children to go to school to get an education, to become lawyers and doctors and judges, so that our Caymanian people can take these positions in this country. These people come from the outside world. They don't identify with us. Many of them don't like us. Let me say it again. Many of them here, they do not like us, the indigenous population. And if you watch the court system, Caymanians are being locked up at the same rate as blacks in America for some of the things that they overlook with outsiders. They don't overlook with us. They're criminalized. They're getting rid of us one way or another by criminalizing us to justify the unemployment, to justify that we can't give you a job because you got a criminal record. We see it. Caymanian go away to school, come back with a college degree. They tell you things. Oh, they insult you and tell you, oh, you're overqualified. You're too smart. Well, the guy you just hired, we're around the same age. He went to the same university, got the same degree. Why is his degree good enough and mine makes me too smart, or mine doesn't make me smart enough? You see, the only qualification our people lack, our people need to wake up and realize that race has something to do with what's going on here. Listen, when people like Wade DaCosta and Sammy Jackson are referred to in this country as white niggers, you know what they see when they see Charles Whitaker. You know what they see when they see Sandy Hill. You know what they see when they see the little black boy and black girl from Central Georgetown. Because if you don't know Wade and Sammy, when you see them, they could pass them two white guys from Alabama or Tennessee or Iowa or Canada or Australia or the UK, any place else without you knowing it. But they don't qualify because they're from this island. So many of our people think that you're one of them. They don't see it that way. And the discrimination that we need in this country to join, instead of some people criticizing what's going on in America, we need to join the movement, because we have a fight that has to be fought here too.
So Anne says that race is a hard conversation in Cayman. I want to focus on that for a second. Why, in your opinion, Charles, is race a hard conversation in Cayman? What makes it so hard for us to accept that we have racism here? I mean,
we're a brainwashed. We are a society filled with self-hate, and we've been brainwashed. Many of our people think because they got a little light skin, they think they're white. They think they're white. But these people live by the code that if 1 ounce of black blood makes you black, and there's nobody here, no Caymanian here that don't have a black person in their family. So we ain't white. My mama white skinned, but she ain't white. You know, but that's the problem. It's lack of enlightenment, and we believe, we believe solely. We believe in this country that black is inferior. Sadly, we believe it. Many of our people, you tell them they're black, and they'll say, I ain't black, and they get mad at you. Some of them listen to me right now are very upset that I'm saying these things. Yeah. But I don't say it to be mean. I say it out of love. It's time for enlightenment. It's time for enlightenment. I'm trying to draw you out of the darkness.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's why,
Charles, I have heard some of the most ridiculous things, as someone who, as I said earlier, lived in the States for 15 years. When I came back to Cayman, there was a period of adjustment in my psyche to understand how Caymanians thought and how Caymanians operate. And initially, I couldn't relate to a lot of what Caymanians were saying. So when a Caymanian says to me, I'm Caymanian white, I'm like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah, we have certain persons here who, because they are mixed race, they have this idea in the back of their head. If they carry a certain last name in particular, because there are persons in this community who are still known as Black families. So, for example, the MacFields, we are a Black family. You've got, I'm trying to think of who else would be some of the larger ones, but when you start getting into, okay, my name is a Bodden, or my name is a Colonel, or my name is a McTaggart, or my name is a Foster, or, you kind of then move into that realm of, okay, we're not Black Caymanians, we are white, and we came from, most of them are, came in from Jamaica, their ancestry, but you still look at it and you've got 1 ounce of black blood that makes you Black. So regardless of how you view yourself, and those persons, because of the color of their skin and because of their last name and because of their historical family connections, they were the merchant class here in the Cayman Islands. So even when people say to me, there is no racism here, it's classism, I'm like, you are just peeling off. It's like an onion. You've only peeled off
the ignorant. It's ignorant.
It's
ignorant.
That the financial success of an individual is directly tied in to the color of their skin. And the few persons of color who have, come out of that financial box, if you will, and acquired some sort of financial independence, and they've, in other words, got coins in their bank account, even those persons, when you look at their lives, they're more likely, because of self-hate issues, they are more likely to marry an expat white person than anybody else. And I mean, I
Yep.
find, absolutely astonishing, because the reason why, in my mind, that is being done, and not to say those persons are not perfectly nice people, and you, of course, I was married to a white man, and you can fall in love with people from other races. That's not the point. The point is, the reason why a lot of people are doing it is because they know that despite their financial successes, in order to give their children a little bit of an easier life, a little bit more of a fighting chance than they had in Cayman, they need to lighten up that color a little bit, and they need to marry someone and have interracial children. So there was a young man who was on the show this morning. He was saying that that's like, even in America, that is the holy grail right now, is to have mixed race children. But I
Yep.
think in Cayman, it's not so much about mixed race children. It's about trying to get a little bit closer to white. If your
The
children,
white.
yeah, if your children are
Yeah,
fair
because
skinned, they have straighter
be-
hair.
because in Cayman, sadly, in the black society, and the thing is, the only people who are disillusional about who Caymanians are Caymanians, because these people know what black, what white is in us. These people, they are aware of how it got there. They
Mhm.
know of the history. They're well aware of the history. The only people who are disillusioned about our history is us. I mean, we, you know, we have Caymanians. Like part of what you were saying this morning about I will ruffle some feathers on Facebook is I read a few posts about the same thing about history, education, and awareness of race, and I mentioned and somebody brought up a name of Mr. Roy Borden, and I asked a question, you know, something about the land, and I said, well, uh, this person said he dealt with the problem. I said, well, if he dealt with the problem, how come the problem is still here?
Mhm.
You know? And then I went on to say there was still much more for him to do. And I said one of the things he could do is to stop, he could start, please allow me to say he could start by correcting the notion that stop telling people that we had slavery here, but it wasn't bad slavery. Now, I never heard him say that, but I have had many conversations with Caymanians
Mhm.
who have said, well, Charles, I don't know what you're talking about slavery all the time because we didn't have bad slavery here. Like it wasn't Jamaican. Even Mr. Roy Borden said, and that's the name I always hear. So even Mr. Roy Borden said, we didn't have bad slavery. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wait a minute, Sandra. That's like, if I punch you in the mouth, who dares to tell you, come on, Sandra, suck that up. That punch didn't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you know what I'm saying? So this is part of it. I went on to talk about
What
it, and
is
I went,
what is non-bad slavery? Like, what is that? What is
oh, that's
that?
not about slavery. But here's the thing. I want to show you something. If all people would just stop and think for a minute, slavery was you work for me when I tell you, where I tell you, as long as I tell you, and I give you nothing at the end of the day. Now,
Mhm.
if I told you, Sandy, I want you to come and work for me for 6 weeks, and I'm gonna pay you $3,000,
Mhm.
and you work faithfully for me, and at the end of that 6 weeks,
Mhm.
I didn't give you that $3,000. Naturally, you would be upset. You'd be angry with me. Naturally,
Mhm.
and this is what I'm saying. Our people don't think. This is where you see the brainwash education, the hoodwink. Because for you to even repeat it if it was said, come
Mhm.
on, just stop and think. Now you got to say these people work for almost 200 years and not paid. In
Right.
fact, when the British ended slavery here, they paid the slave owners
And I mean, it
and
wasn't,
not the slaves.
Charles, it wasn't just about being not paid. It was about being beaten,
The rapes, the
subject,
whippings.
yeah,
Well,
being,
I was gonna get to that. I was gonna get to that.
yeah.
You know, let's think of Long Celia. Go
Mhm.
tell Long Celia if she was here and ask her, was it
Mhm.
bad? You got 50 lashes. That wasn't that bad. What about the little boy who was beaten because he wanted to go play and he was being beaten because he wasn't working fast enough? What about the little girl who was raped? So when I hear people say, like I said, I've had that conversation maybe 20 times or more, no less than 20 times, maybe more. I've heard that said, that was always the name justifiable that he said it, and seemed that he said it was true. And I'm just like, listen, if he said it, you need to apologize for it. That's the way I see it. Now, I have heard him say myself on the radio that we had slavery here, but we were not an enslaved society. That in itself, again, is not factual. At one point in time, we had 1,650 people in this country, and 900 of them were slaves.
Right.
How were we not an enslaved society?
And
how were we not?
In fact, many will argue today, Charles, that we are still enslaved because we don't even.
Remember what I started off by saying. As long as the ideologies and the practices of slavery is still implemented, slavery is not over. Look, Willie Lynch is still alive in this country. You know, go online and read you don't have to read the whole Willie Lynch letter. Just read some of the Willie Lynch letter, and you will come off saying, whoa, Willie Lynch lives in Grand Cayman. He is still alive here. You know, he's still alive here. And that's our people problem.
Yeah. Let me just say that today across the world is actually Blackout Tuesday. So there are a lot of television, radio stations across the world that have decided today that they will black out. They will not be hosting or having a show. BBC Radio 1 Extra, for example, they've been holding a series of discussions and debates around this issue and in support of the Black community. And they have decided to do a complete blackout. So a lot of the major labels and industries around the world are having Blackout Tuesday today in support of Black Lives Matter. Another way of peacefully protesting. Obviously here, we're not doing a Blackout Tuesday because I don't think we can ever have enough dialogue in this discussion, especially in this country. We just don't talk about it. You know, when you bring up racism and you want to talk about race in the Cayman Islands, people tell you that, oh, that doesn't exist. And that's why I can relate to what Anne says when Anne says that this is a very difficult topic to have because we have racism within the Cayman community. So we have Caymanians, they're 100% Caymanians, who will tell you or who will get upset when their daughter decides to marry a Black man.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm talking
Let me give
about?
Let me give you my first experience of race right here in the Cayman Islands. It was Mr. Truman Borden's father, Mr. Arthur Borden. It had happened to me before. But it was Friday, but it happened to me the last time. It was Friday, September the 15th, 1989. I was working at Just Jeeps. I walked across the street to buy 2 powders and a drink. I was on my break. When I got in there, just as I got in the door, I got my powder and my drink, and a bunch of maybe like 10 to 12 tourists came in off the cruise ship. They were buying water and stuff like that. And I could still see the vision of this white man. The people were nice. They all said hello and, you know, hi. But Mr. Arthur Borden, he took the minute I walked in, he said, hurry up, get out of my store, you little black bastard. And he started going on. And it happened to me before. So in my ignorance, I used to think that perhaps I looked like somebody that troubled this old man. And he used to be pulling up his back pocket, you know, I thought he had a nervous twitch or something. So he would not take my money. You know, he took my money and he put it down in front of the cash register. And he wouldn't check me out until he checked out all the other people, the tourists, the white folks. And then the last person was to come out was the white man. He was dressed in a straw hat, out on a polo shirt, 2-colored polo shirt, cut off, you know, pants, with a polo shorts like cargo pants. And Mr. Arthur began, get out of my store, you little black bastard, you little black SOB, get out of my store, you little nigger, you little monkey, you little this. And he had done it to me before. But what stood in it? And it always made me wonder, like, what's going on with him? But raised in a society where the only person I heard talk about my father was race was my father. But being a young boy and you hear your father, you oftentimes tend to dismiss your father because it's your father. I know why I did it, because my son does it to me sometimes. So the white man, he stopped, and I could still see that man standing there, and he's looking at Mr. Arthur. And he's shaking his head. He's looking at him, and he looks at me, and he looks at him, and I'm just standing there Like, I'm waiting for him to enlighten me what's going on. But that's being raised in a society where we don't talk about race and about the truth about race. We like to pretend in this country like we live in a bubble. We'd rather bury our heads in the sand and pretend we don't have these issues here. They don't exist here. And so he was trying to muffle himself so the man wouldn't hear him, but he had gotten so enraged with his hate. I could still see Mr. Arthur's face. He was so filled with rage when he realized the man was hearing him. And he just kept cursing me. Get out of my store, you little black bastard, you little black son of a bitch. Get out of my store, you little SOB. And get out of my store, you little monkey.
Wow.
And the man looked at me and the man just shook his head and walked away.
Wow.
From that day, it stood in my mind.
Wow.
But it wasn't until a few years later, I was 21. I was living in America, in the States then, and I came back. And one night I was at the boxing gym and I heard Michael Pert and Noel Thomas and Ian Osborne talking about it. And they were talking about their experiences. And I stopped. I was shadow boxing in the ring. I stopped. I said, you know what? That happened to me. And I said, you know what? He didn't say he cursed me out. He has this nervous twitch. He pulled up his back pocket and they turned to me and said, Charles, that's not a nervous twitch. He carries a 38 in his back pocket.
What?
And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
And that's when made me realize that I need to learn about race. Because you know when they say what you don't know can hurt you, that made me realize that what I don't know could hurt me.
Definitely.
When I told my father about it, my father said, "You stay away from him."
Wow.
Because I don't want to have to be the one who bury him, who caused his burial. But if he hurts you, that's gonna happen. You stay. My father said he had always been that way. And then my father told me the story, how he had been fired from his job for promoting segregation in the Cayman Islands. The man named Gerard, when he was the head of civil service or something it was, he wouldn't let blacks and whites have staff parties together and wouldn't let them have dance nights together. He kept trying to keep them apart. So our idea that there's no racism in this country is a lie. But that's what we do. We bury our heads in the sand and we like to pretend as if we are so different from the rest of the world, as if we don't have the problems of the rest of the world. But if we don't confront the issue, the growing issue of race in this country, look, why do you think that Caymanians are having a hard time getting employment, no matter how capable, how able, how willing? It's because of race. You come back with a college degree, you can't get in because these people come from countries with centuries long of history of oppressing people that look like you and me.
Anne makes a point on that as well. She says that we have our own systemic racism here, but we are also we're also importing it. So I find this interesting because I think Anne is 100% spot on. You know, I see it all the time, and I hate to say it, but you know, there are certain countries that where they come from, I don't know if they don't, you know, mingle with persons of color, if they don't have that type of diversity or whatever, but when they come here, you can see the reservations with them, even, you know, going to local hangouts or even in the workplace, sitting down and having a conversation with, you know, a Caymanian or a Jamaican or, you know, just anyone who's different than them. And I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, but we have a double whammy in that we have our own systemic problems, and then we turn around and we import persons who are heading up government agencies and departments, you know, big government services, private sector, lawyers or accountants. They are running.
And they are better, and this comes more natural to them. Listen, racism comes as natural to white folks as taking a breath. This sound hard to say, but it is the truth. It's embedded. It is embedded. Let me remind you something about experience and qualifications. I remember one time there was a business in West Bay called Micromatrix. You might remember it. And I was up there with the lady who owned it. And I'll never forget this.
Yes.
This white gentleman comes in. He's in there when I got in. He was there. He was doing some work. And he didn't know how to use, I think it was the fax. He didn't know how to use the photocopier, and he wanted to fax something and photocopy something, I think it was. And he couldn't do it. So he asked the lady, Sandra Catron at the time, to do it, to show him how to show him. And Sandra seen that it was a resume that he was handing out. And I'll never forget it. Sandra couldn't hold herself. She said, you imagine these are the people they bring here to hire about all the experience they have, and they can't use a fax machine. Yeah. You see, the only qualifications our people lack is that they don't have the complexion for the connection. That is, listen, why is it that people come here 2, 3, 4, 5 months on a work permit, and the bank will give them a loan for $500,000 to buy a house, and a Caymanian will be here trying and can't get it? I have a cousin who had a piece of land worth almost $1 million, and he owed the bank some money, and he was trying to, restructure his loan. He was paying the debt, but he's trying to restructure everything, and the bank wouldn't work with him. Eventually, he was able to sell that land, paid off the bank, and bought property from the same very bank. But I watched that struggle, and that I pay attention. I pay attention when I'm around something. I take note. I take mental notes of what's going on, and I watched that struggle take place, and I said, "Wow, this is what systemic racism." And living in America, you hear people talk about these things because it's more common, and it's more of a discussion that people have, and people point things out to you. And so I see the systemic racism that people say in Cayman. Oh, we don't have no racism. I see it. I see it. And I think if a lot more of our people would live abroad, would spend more time with some people from someplace else, and just to get a different perspective, read of how they lay down the foundations in the U.S. But once they look in the U.S., this is one of the ways they did it. They do it through banking. They do it through finances. You can't get a house. You can't get a mortgage. They give you higher interest rates.
I was just thinking, Charles, about the movie called The Banker, which is a 2020 film. If you guys have not seen that movie, I'm going to put the link here to the description. You need to find this movie and you need to watch it, because this was an African-American man who back in the 1920s or 30s started to acquire with his other African-American partner all sorts of property in California. But in order to make this work, they had to hire, they had the brains behind this, but they had to hire a white person to front for them and teach him what to say, and if they
what to do.
Yeah, and these financial structures. And what is so amazing is it fell apart, eventually, because the white man messed up and he did something that he shouldn't have been doing. They had acquired tons of bank terms of properties in Los Angeles. It was
I've seen that.
But at the time, these gentlemen were actually millionaires in their own right, and they did it on their own. Except in America, as a black man, then you couldn't do it on your own. So they had the face of the operations being a young white guy, and at the end of it, he got away scot-free. The feds came down on them and made all sorts of allegations and whatever. Folks, if you've not seen this movie, you do not understand the connection between systemic racism, owning property rights, even access to loans to start up your own business.
Access to loans.
Connected. There is no way to separate this. And let me just address, we have Keith here who's saying that part of the issue is the biggest problem, he says, with Black community is fatherless homes. Now, Keith, I don't have an issue with that comment as a matter of principle, but as a matter of history, I want you to look at and tell me, why are Black communities mostly fatherless homes? Let's look at the history of how we have come to that, right?
I was just going to get to that.
That isn't something that is because Black people, once again, are just bad people and don't want to raise their children. Listen, look at the legacy of history of slavery. Slavery did. One of the ways
Black people were made to make children and leave.
Separate the family at the core, because if you have a family and you have a support system, that makes you a much stronger person, and you have, the mother support, you've got the father, you can fight against things like racism and like oppressive individuals. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, You broke the family down at its very core. So one of the first things they did as you came off of the ship is they ripped families apart. There were
With
very
families apart.
few families of slaves that were able to stay together. They purposely did it. So they would take the children and send them, halfway around the US to one plantation. They would take the mother, send her to another plantation, and they would rip the men and send them elsewhere. That was a strategic move on the part of slave owners and plantation owners. So
And Sandy,
I want you just one second, Charles. I really want to address Keith on this point because he, shared. I don't even know what kind of article he shared, a video or something. But Keith, you need to educate yourself because when you make a comment like that and not understand the historical reasons for why that continue to exist today, we will never ever make progress on this.
never.
And this isn't about us trying to rehash history. We are rehashing history for the sole purpose of trying to
Of education
teams,
and enlightenment.
educate people, right? So
Educate people.
when you understand that that was the strategy that was utilized on the slaves and on the African American and Black community, whatever labels you want to put on them, that strategy has had a lasting impact, social impact on one generation after the next generation, and so on. Black people were never, once they were ripped apart from their families, they were never given the resources and institutions to be able to build back their families. So yes, you may have a disproportionately higher number of African Americans and even Caribbean Americans fall into the same category that do not understand the importance of keeping that family unit together at all costs and working together in a unified way as a family. Now, listen, there have been studies that have been done that illustrate that when people, a race of people, go through a traumatic event, their DNA is altered because of that trauma. I want you to understand what I'm saying. So the Jewish people, for example, went through their own genocide during World War II with the Germans. That process has altered the mitochondrial DNA. So in other words, you can't get any deeper in your DNA than that, of Jewish people. And that trauma that is then created impacts different things that happens in communities. I want you to think about the trauma that would have been created in the African American community over hundreds of years of slavery. Then think about that, and you come back to me with this argument or this discussion that the biggest problem with Black communities is fatherless homes. It is a problem. But what is the problem? The problem? And how will it ever be addressed if we do not talk about where it started from and where it comes from and why in somebody's DNA they do not understand the importance of having a good father, right?
And it was strategic, and it was a strategic problem too.
Yeah, of being in homes where you had that stability of both a mother and a father.
That's why, Sandy, I said people need to read the Willie Lynch letter. Willie Lynch was a slave owner in Barbados in the year 1712. He was so diabolical that they heard about him. The word lynching was made from his last name. Lynchenburg, Virginia was named in honor of him. Okay? He owned a slave plantation in Barbados, and they heard about him in Virginia. The slaves in Virginia, the colonies of Virginia, were uprising and overthrowing and running away. So they sent for him to come and give them lessons, a lecture on what to do. On his ride there, he said, I see you're losing valuable stock. You see, back in those days, Black people were more valuable than gold and money. That's what we were considered. The stock market was about what you traded in the stock market was Black people. And he said, you're losing valuable stock. He said, I have some tricks in my bag. If you implement them, ancient Rome would envy you, would envy us. He said, you got to take the biggest, blackest nigger among them and beat him within an inch of his life. But don't you kill him. Don't kill him, because you want to use him as an example. The bravest one, the one most outspoken. Look around you. That's what they do in Cayman today with those Caymanians who speak up, but you still have to speak. And that's why we have to get together and fight for each other, with each other, against the system. And then he said, part of the plan was to destroy the family, make sure that the mother would treat her son more like the daughter and the daughter more like the son. So sometimes when you see a black mother hold her black son so close to her bosom, he said she treats her daughter so different. Like Sandra said, the DNA has been changed. Then the DNA has been changed. These things didn't just happen. You must understand how you're gonna get out of where you at, is to know how you got there. Let's go back to fatherless homes in America. Once they started low-income housing, one of the things they used to say, the mother could come, but you can't bring your husband, can't bring a boyfriend, there can't be a father in the house. These things were not by design. Well, I'm sorry, these things were not by accident, they are by design. What we are seeing is by design. So everything you see happening, and I don't want to get away from the Cayman Islands, because while I'm interested in what goes on in America, as I lived in, I got kids there. I'm very much interested in what goes on here. I'm very much, because I intend to throw my hat into the political arena here.
Yes. Because
I'm very concerned. And so our people need to wake up. We really, really need to wake up. We need to go read. I think they just need to go read, look at history, go study, go look at systemic racism. You see, if you only know what you're told, then you're only as smart as the storyteller wants you to be. Jesus said, read and know for yourself, and study to show yourself approved, that no one may deceive you. And that's it. Read it, just go look. The internet is there. Everybody got a computer in their hand these days. That cell phone. Google it. You can find anything on the internet now. You get all the information you need. Go read your history. Like I said earlier, our history didn't begin with slavery. Okay, we weren't always, before slavery, long before them, we were the ones, hundreds of years before slavery, we were the ones who could read and write. They were the ones who were illiterate, living in caves in Europe.
And you know what's
Ravish was sick. Ravish was sickness and disease.
Yeah, Charles, we got to wrap up here. We've only got an hour this evening, but we'll be joined by Charles again on Thursday morning at 7:15. So we will continue this conversation. But we were saying this morning, what is so incredibly interesting about history is a lot of things that impacted the Black and African American community was conveniently left out of the history books. So it's hard to sometimes find that information. And even when you find it, it's not as accurate. We were talking about the race riots 99 years ago that occurred and that were started by white people and killed over 300 people, 300 African-American people, and caused millions of dollars in properties in what was considered the Black Wall Street, a influential area at the time. And there's so much information when you read up on that is actually lost in the history books, because nobody, even as it was happening, no one was concerned about recording it accurately and providing the accurate information, simply because it wasn't in their best interest to do so. So on Thursday, Charles will be joining us again at 7:15 in the morning. I want to talk about Cayman Brac. I see someone mentioned, they said, let's start with Cayman Brac, because Cayman Brackers seem to have a real issue believing that they are colored people, that they are Black folks. And this is something I hear about Brackers all the time. And so we're going to talk about Cayman Brac and how easy it becomes for them to import, persons who are very racist and prejudiced from other countries, because they've already got that in their DNA on that particular island. It's a small place, but it's shocking.
So I'm going to say something real quick. I want to show you how, when I was talking about the criminal justice system in this country being just as prejudiced and racist as the one in America. You remember the guy who ran away from here, the guy who was given his passport to leave was caught with the hundreds of guns and ammunition. They haven't gone looking for him. Last time I saw him, he was on the news in the U.S. giving the Cayman Islands a bad name. I saw this on the news. That's the last time I saw him. There are no extraditions for him. You see, the judge who let him go, that's what he was saying. You go ahead and go on about your business. But a Caymanian who has to come back home is not even given. I've heard of Caymanians not being allowed to travel, not being allowed to leave anywhere when they have to come back home. See, the difference is we see the racism is there. It's in this country. And that's why.
You know, look at the two Jamaican care workers from the Bonaventure home.
Yeah, they got them back.
They certainly extradited him. And the extradition papers in that case were like well over 100 pages, so I can tell you. All right, thank you so much for joining in this evening. You know, it's a frank and honest discussion. I reckon it's not for everyone. If you want to continue to live in a world of your own creation, then Cold Hard Truth isn't for you at all. As a matter of fact, Cayman Road isn't for you. And we take no offense in telling you that. We take no offense at you looking at, you know, other things that suit your taste.
Well,
we did go to the prison just really briefly today, as some prisoners are going on a hunger strike. We're getting some more information on that. We're going to make a formal request because when I showed up there, of course, I was not permitted to, in the end, speak with the prisoners. And then they were threatened with being charged and moved to the Northward facility, which obviously they do not want. So we're going to see if we can get a formal interview application submitted. The prison service did confirm after 5 o'clock this evening that there was a hunger strike underway by some of the men that are at that facility. And yeah, I mean, we'll see what comes out of that situation. But again, you know, another example of where you're told to shut up, you have no rights, you can't speak on anything, you cannot express yourself. And it is what it is. And trust me when I tell you, they are doing everything in their power imaginable to censor us here at Cayman Road, and we're just not going to have it.
Absolutely. So let me say in closing real quickly. We should not remain quiet when we hear about prisoners on a hunger strike. We should all listen. Wherever there's an injustice, where there's an inkling that there may be an injustice, we should we need to become our brother's keeper. If we Caymanians continue to fail to stand with and for one another, pretty soon it will be just me left or just you left, and there will be no one left to stand for you. Remember what happened with the Jews when no one was left to stand.
Yep. Okay. So Anne says, true story. I was told how to pinch my daughter's nose so it wouldn't be so wide. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. All right, folks. Alma, Jason, Esther, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Cameron says that she tuned in late this evening. You can go back and watch the program. Miss Paula, thank you guys also. Marna says, Charles, you are like your father, knows your history, and your father told me lots of history. So history is important. There's a reason why you need to know it. Lashanda says, I agree with you, sir. They give the young Caymanians a hard time to get a loan. Build for your future. Well, if it's the car loan you're looking for, they'll give that to you real easy because that's not an investment.
Right now, because it's a loss. Because it's a loss. We need to build our own economic machine in this country. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
We need to start buying Caymanian. That's what we need to start doing. We need to do that. Stop supporting their business. We need to begin to support one another. Where can I find a Caymanian? Let's build each other, because everybody here, majority of the people here is against us. Don't you get it twisted. Some people are going to tell you, there goes Charles preaching division. No. I'm preaching unity and preservation, the preservation of the indigenous people of this land. Those are who I am most concerned about first. Those who don't like what I say, I'm not for you. If you don't want to hear the truth, when you hear I'm coming on, turn it off, because I'm about the truth. I'm in the truth business.
Cameron wants us to take a break and come back for the conversation. Unfortunately, Cameron, we've got other commitments, but do tune in tomorrow morning at 7:15. We will have, again, guests from America joining the conversation.
Thursday, Cameron.
And Charles will be back on Thursday morning at 7:15. And we also have scheduled at 8:15 to come on Mr. Frank Macfield, who will also be joining the conversation. And hopefully the young lady, Jasmine, who's scheduled to come on this evening, she was not feeling well, but we'll check in with her maybe on Thursday evening or Friday to see how she's feeling and how she's coming along. All right, Charles, thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Charles, I'll see you on Thursday morning at 7:15, God's willing.
Thank you, Sandy. Have a good evening, everybody. God bless. Love you, Cayman.
Thank you. So again, that's Charles the Killer Whitaker, as most of you know him, and we will continue this conversation in the morning. This isn't something that's going to disappear just after one or two discussions. So we have dedicated this entire week really in honor of all of the George Floyds of the world who have lost their lives, just recklessly and for no real justified cause, for a $20 bill that somebody thought was fake, and now we're hearing that it probably wasn't even fake at all. Just absolutely unbelievable. Want to leave you with this thought. Have you ever dealt with classism, racism, colorism, or even weightism? And then somebody crossed out, this is a question on Jamaica media, it crossed out Jamaica. Just anywhere in the world we've dealt with this. What was your experience like? And hopefully we're going to have King joining us in the discussion as well from the UK at some point between Thursday and Friday. Folks, let's end the show with our national song. Have a little bit of pride in who we are. We are Caymanians first and foremost.